G'day, you stinky Bomber fans. We have got a big game of footy this weekend. I reckon a week ago we're probably gearing up for some big losses, but after that Brisbane performance, albeit in a loss, there is now hope that the boys can get up for this and give the Blues a challenge. In many ways, Carlton are a more challenging team to face up against given our injury crisis. It is definitely a game we go in as underdogs for, but it is also definitely a game we can win. So let's chat about it. Essendon up against Carlton, fierce rivals, King's birthday eve, Sunday night at the MCG. But first, some votes from the Brisbane game. Okay, votes. We agreed with the main ones. Caldwell got the max amount. Martin was behind him, and young Nate Caddy excited enough to get votes from the both of us. The only difference was the role player. I gave it to Laverty. You guys gave it to Peter Wright. I think they were both really underrated on the night, so that's good. The overall tally, there is life. Merritt still sits first, but there is now competition behind him. Nick Martin is right on his tail. He is in second place. Behind him is Sam Durham in third. Jai Caldwell has leapt between Durham and Reid to go to fourth. Dersmer's still polling well, and then the 10 is rounded out with McGrath, Wright, Archie Perkins, and Nate Caddy, who has found himself here. So yeah, keep up the votes, guys. Alrighty, King's birthday eve. The third of these games. It's a new marquee match. The first one we got the job done in. That was a fun night. Last year it was less fun. The Blues got the dub there. Third time round, it's a tough game to predict. It's always a little bit tough to predict games with rivals involved. The Bombers and Blues obviously don't like each other. But they have won 4 of the last 5, Carlton. And to be fair, they've been the better team in the last few years. But this season, you've probably got to say Essendon have been the better side. We're 6 wins and 5 losses. They're 4 wins and 7 losses. Even with our injuries, we've kept our win-loss tally in a good spot. And look, even though we are probably playing better footy, the Blues are going to go into this game as the favourites. And that is fair. They've been pretty ordinary this season, Carlton. 4 wins from 11, but that is not where we thought they'd be. At their best, they've looked capable, more than capable. They beat the Cats. They weren't far off the Dogs or the Pies. They've got a really good percentage compared to us. It is not unreasonable to think that these current ladder positions could be switched by the end of the year. We're rebuilding. The Blues are supposed to be challenging for a flag, even if they're doing a pretty lousy job at it, but that is what they're trying to achieve. If they lose this game, if they go 4-8, it is going to be a long road back. This is a massive must-win game for the Blues. If they win, their season is still alive. Finals is still on the cards. If they lose, it's chaos. Chaos at Carlton. And that's why, this isn't everything Essendon Channel, obviously. But I think in this game, the spotlight is well and truly on Carlton. They have the expectation. They have to win this game of footy. So it's on us to try and cause a boil over. So our opponents, what is the deal with Carlton? All right. Surely they should be better than this, you would think. That they've got just about the best spine in the competition. Wiedering down back, Cripps and Walsh in the guts, De Koning in the ruck, Curnow and Mackay up forward. That is a premiership spine. You can build it around that to win a flag. That's what they're trying to do, Carlton. The issue is everything else around in the team is just iffy. They seem to not really have anything else that they can rely on outside of their best players. And unfortunately, their best players have been pretty patchy this year. Curnow has been good, but not as great as he was previously. Cripps, Walsh, these guys aren't playing at their best, which is really forcing that side on the back foot. And yes, because of it, we've seen the best of players like George Hewitt, but there just isn't enough rounded talent on this list to win games of footy if the best players on that team aren't playing well. It is as simple as that for me. I look at this Carlton 23, I see so many spots on the field that are just not elite quality. There are plenty of players from North and West Coast that could fit into this team right now, and I'm sure Carlton fans would agree with that. If they've got Wiedering, Curnow, Sard, Walsh, Mackay, Cripps, if they're all playing great footy, they win matches. Their best is elite. It is hard to stop. They've got guys that are just incredible footballers. They've got more top-end talent on their list than us. But I think, despite us rebuilding and suffering injuries, I think we go into this game with the more rounded 23. It is very much a game reliant on what Carlton's best do. If Cripps gets off the leash, if Curnow and Mackay kick goals, if Wiedering intercepts, we're probably in a lot of trouble. Let's talk about Mackay and Curnow, who I just mentioned. So last week we faced up against the Lions with Jaden Laverty acting as our sole key defender. It kind of worked. We lost the game, but I think we held them to a reasonable score given the amount of entries. But I'm probably more worried about Carlton's forward line than I am Brisbane's. I think Brisbane's team as a whole is better. Their ball movement, it's so good. It gives them so many looks inside 50. We defended it all right. 62 inside 50s and a score under 100 is good. But I think there's a world where Carlton, despite they're so inefficient, despite all their cons on their team, all the negatives, there's a world where that forward line, they can rely on it. They could go trigger happy on the deep entry kicks, high up and under, and they can just trust Mackay and Curnow to do the rest. That could be more dangerous than the way Brisbane played. Carlton are a far worse team, but they, Hipwood and Logan Morris are serviceable forwards. Mackay and Curnow, it is hard to see how we stop them if they're up and about. Laverty is a solid 10 centimetres or so smaller than Mackay. I don't even know who could match up on Curnow. It's not going to be Jackson Pryor or Redmond. They can't, so who's going to do it? I'm not worried about ground level. They don't have much there. It's not a great forward line overall, but given our injuries, the 19 metres of height we're missing, Mackay and Curnow are well and truly players to watch. They're almost the most important players in this game. We've got our 5th string key defender playing on 2 Coleman medalists. That is very dangerous, and I genuinely think defending Carlton could be harder than defending Brisbane, just because of those 2 players. Carlton are a high inside 50 team. They're pretty easy to defend for the most part with those entries. Their ball movement isn't great, but yeah, when you've got a defensive structure like ours at the moment, with Reid, Mackay, Ridley, even Lewis Hayes missing, he was in front of Laverty, remember? Carlton really should make us pay. Their fans should be pretty concerned if they can't make the most of the advantage that they've got back there, even in the wet. I know that it might rain on the weekend. That could help us in this regard, but even in the wet, Curnow and Mackay are players that should take control of this game. They're good enough to. It'll be a worry for Carlton fans if they don't. So really, what happens now with our defensive situation, which is pretty hard to manage, I think, it makes it crucial to defend the ball before it enters our D50. We have to take pressure off our back 6. It's tough because the Blues, they average 55 inside 50s a game. That is the 4th most in the comp. We did manage with those numbers against Brisbane, but I think we really have to restrict the Blues going forward this week. If they go in 62 times, it makes us really hard for us to win the game. So like we did with Brisbane, we really need to get on top around the ground as much as we can. Carlton, if anything, they're a better territory team than the Lions. They not only restrict their opponents bringing the ball in, but they get plenty themselves, and it's that work in the contest that really gets them that advantage. And I don't think this game's going to be like Brisbane, where you so clearly have, teams playing the way they want to, preferences. I don't think you'll have one team who prefers the ball in open play and one who prefers it in the contest. I think with this game, it's about finding that balance of both and managing to get those small wins and remain effective, not only with ball in hand, but when defending the ball. This is 100% a game where you need to defend the ball around the field. And for that, it's going to be an interesting contest. You've got both these teams in arm wrestles as to who can get first usage out of stoppages and centre bounces and contests. And then from there, it's going to be about who can use the footy and progress it better. It's hard to really say who will beat who in what areas of this game. And that's why it's not an easy game to predict. Last week, we knew how it was going to play out, and it played out the way we thought it was, albeit with a smaller margin. This week, it's a lot tougher to say how this game will play out, especially with the wet, which also makes it a tougher game to just tip overall. And I really do think that this game is just, the way it's built up, it has to be about individuals for me. And that's not really the case a lot of the time. I'm someone who will preach, system and structure over individuals. But in a game like this, maybe in wet conditions, it really becomes about what players on each team can take control and will themselves and their team forward. For Essendon, it could be Sam Durham, it could be Jai Caldwell or Zach Merritt. For Carlton, you've got plenty of players, Cripps, Walsh. I think this is a game where the best on ground stats really matter. If Carlton have 4 of the best 5 or 6 players on the park, that could be enough to ensure a win. Whereas if we have the Brownlow votes or the coaches' votes covered, that could be the win in our favour. And I've said this about another game, I forget which one, but I feel like this is a game where if you have the best performers on your team, the win is secured. Because both these teams, they rely on individuals. I said I prefer our spread, but it's not like anyone outside of Merritt and Durham and Martin and throw in Caldwell a bit as well. It's not like many players on our team can single-handedly win a game for us. If those 4 are having down days, do Essendon win? That's a question we have to ask ourselves, and it's the same for Carlton with a few of their top players. I think on Sunday, given the possible conditions, given the state of these 2 teams, it's really important to see who's best on ground, which makes negating roles really important. Caddy will probably need to keep Wiedering accountable, or Wright maybe. Setterfield could play a role on Paddy Cripps. Maybe Guelphy runs with Sard. Even Carlton, Chincotta might come in to tag Merritt. There are a few things that could be done this week which will really impact the game. And this does go without saying, but I feel like this is very much a game where having a proper crack matters. not just pressure around the ball and keeping the ball in good areas through effort, although that is important. I think having a crack with, even ball use. We looked, against Brisbane, we looked exciting, we looked fun, we were hard to defend, there was a bit of chaos, but we were having a crack with it. I hope that's the way we start to play for the rest of the year. And even if it doesn't always work, we might have some bad losses. It's fun to watch, and I think it's good for the future. It was a good glimpse into how we could look, I think. I think both these teams really got to go out and have a crack here, and I'd be surprised if one of us don't. This is a big game to get up for. I'll happily take a belting from the Bulldogs. If any team was to beat Essendon, it's the Bulldogs. But if we go out and dish up, a stinker against the Blues this week, I don't care about injuries. I don't even expect us to win games in the state we're in. But what I do expect is effort and intent to win. We might not get the win, but I don't want to see us go out and give up halfway through or go out and fail to rise to the occasion. Games like this are crucial for our kids. We're a very young team. We're developing. In 2 to 3 years, when we're hopefully making finals, it'll hopefully be nights like this that help Roberts and Caddy and others get up and perform, with that big game pressure, because it is a big game. I said at the start of the year, I think there are no must-win games, and this isn't one. I'm not really thinking about finals or winning games, but I think a win on Sunday would just be massive for the club. It would be huge for our season, not to boost, us up the ladder or anything, but just for morale and the vibe. If we win another game in the next few weeks, because we've got some tough ones coming up, especially against a team like Carlton, who we just do not like, it would be massive. If I could pick one game to win for the rest of the year, it might be this one, just to give us some bragging rights. Imagine if we beat the Blues without a backline. That would send Carlton into chaos, especially because they're trying to win a flag. We're not. We're rebuilding. And the great thing is, this game is definitely winnable. It is there for the taking if we want it. I think the Blues have the upper hand, and the pressure is on them to win, but this is definitely a winnable game of footy. They're in our range, Carlton. We lose to teams that we're worse than, and we beat those we're better than. This week will tell us about, where we sit in relation to the Blues. Team news before our prediction, and by the way, shout out to Pommy in Oz. You guys would surely know him. If you don't, go give him a follow or subscribe to him on YouTube. I don't know why you wouldn't be subscribed already. I know he's a Carlton fan, but he's a big-brained Carlton fan, a lovely bloke. But I chucked him a message to help me get the inside scoop about the teams and whatnot. He says that Chincotta could come into the team to tag Merritt. That does kind of fit with what I was saying about individuals. He says that Silvani should return from injury and replace Harry O'Farrell. He says Orazio Fantasia is a shout to come back in as well. That would be fun against his old club. So don't be surprised if any of those occur. Thank you, Pommy, for that. As for the Bombers, we're going to be pretty much unchanged, you would think, aside from maybe Parrish coming in. I think he's proven that he's ready. And to be honest, Elijah Sardis as the sub just doesn't work for me, so that could be a straight swap. We can't really bring in another pure mid for a different position. All of the other mids are performing well as well, so yeah. Some other potential changes, maybe Liam McMahon makes his debut to defence, or Vigo to the joint ruck. Definitely room for a debutant, but I don't know if we'll have one this week. Onto the prediction though. So who wins this game of footy? It is a tough one to get a read on. It could go many ways. The weather will impact it. There's plenty of things that will impact it. I just think if I'm tipping to be correct, and I'm tipping with my head, I'm probably backing the Blues. I definitely think Essendon can cause an upset. I wouldn't be surprised if we win. We were close to the Lions. They're much better than the Blues. That tells us something about us. But I just think that the Blues, on paper, they've got the better names on this team. That really matters in a game like this. I think system and structure is obviously crucial, but sometimes in a good old-fashioned rivalry in the wet, it is just about what you've got at your disposal, and Essendon have injuries, we're rebuilding, Carlton are playing for a flag. The way I see it, we probably won't be too disappointed with the loss given our trajectory, but Carlton, a loss on Sunday, and they would be mortified. I think they've got so much more to play for than us. And yeah, I think they're the more likely team to get the job done. I hope I'm wrong, I really do. But I'm tipping the Blues by 14 points. But yeah, that is that. Cheers for watching, Bomber fans. By the way, I might be a little bit late with some uploads this week. We'll see. I'll get the review out on Monday and the preview for Geelong out on Wednesday, hopefully. But there might be a delay with some other videos. But yeah, that's all. Cheers for watching, Bomber fans. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new. And as always, go Bombers.